If at first you don't succeed, try again. It's something else. That seems to be the strategy at the White House as President Trump and his advisors map out their plans after a botched attempt at health care reform.
Now we're going to go for tax reform, which I've always liked.
But fixing the tax code has been linked to bringing down health care costs to keep the deficit from going up. Trump is also expected to focus on an infrastructure bill and rolling back Obama-era environmental regulations. But Budget Director Mike Mulvaney still had his back up about health care during the Sunday morning talk shows.
My guess is what will happen now is we're going to move on. We really are.
So you're not touching health care. You're moving on.
When it fails, which it will, it may be May, it may be the end of this year, folks will come back to us and say, wow, can we have that bill back again?
This is no longer a 100-day priority.
No.
So who's to blame for the bill's failure? Trump at various points expressed anger at conservative Republicans, then at Democrats. But probably the most curious sequence of events came Saturday night. Trump tweeted, "Watch Judge Jeanine on Fox News tonight at 9, and then this happened.
Paul Ryan needs to step down as Speaker of the House. The reason? He failed to deliver the votes on his health care bill."
This raised questions about whether Trump really wanted to see the House Speaker take the fall, which his chief of staff, of course, denied.
Why would he say, watch her, and then that's the first thing out of her
Because he
mouth?
loves Judge Jeanine, and he wanted to do Judge Jeanine a favor.
So does he want Paul Ryan to step down or
no? No, he doesn't.
But what does he want, actually, and what can he really get accomplished in such a partisan, chaotic environment? Joining me are Farai Chideya, who is a senior writer for 538.com during the campaign, is now a fellow at Harvard's Shorenstein Center for Media Politics and Public Policy. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Dan Primack is a business reporter for Axios. Good to see you, Dan, too. Let me start with you. So is it on the taxes? You were hanging out, from what I understand, at some event with Steve Mnuchin, the Secretary of the Treasury. But without this billion-dollar cut in spending off the health care thing, how do they afford the kind of tax cutting he's talking about?
Well, they can't. Not the kind he was talking about. Look, that's a massive...
He being Trump.
He being Trump. It's a massive hole, but I mean, going a bit bigger, what Trump wants, for example, and what Ryan wants on taxes alone is a giant, Trump talks about a 15% corporate tax rate. Ryan wants a 20% corporate tax rate. You had Grover Norquist today saying that because the health care bill failed, you won't get below 28%. So, I mean, there is so many questions about this. There is no tax bill yet. There's not even really something they've communicated to Congress on this.
So what did Mnuchin say to you about this? Anything?
About that, Mnuchin basically said everything's on the table. He wouldn't say anything specifically about the border adjustment tax, except that we're working on it.
He keeps saying tax cuts for the middle class. Right. But at least from what I've seen so far, unless I've missed something, it seems like health care redux. Cut taxes for the very wealthy and cut services or something for the very poor. What's in this allegedly for the middle class?
Nothing. And I think that that's why you're starting to see some, because in the initial days of the Trump presidency, his voters supported him on substance and not on style. They said, we don't want him tweeting this much, but we like the Muslim ban, we like this, we like that. Now you're starting to see a break on substance, and I think that could really hurt the president, where his own voters are saying, you know what, I don't think he's really doing for me what he said he would.
How about this infrastructure thing? On the surface, I was chided by a caller on our radio show today because I was saying great opportunity for Democrats and Republicans to come together. Some guy said, do your homework, Jim. He was a little nicer than that. This is really about a giveaway to the private sector, who then may in turn create all those jobs. But essentially it's about benefiting his friends in the private sector. You're agreeing with that caller.
I completely agree. And I talked about this a bit during the inauguration process, because we can't call this a stimulus or just an infrastructure bill. Really what it is going to do, as constructed, is reward companies for doing projects that they probably already were doing and giving them a further tax break for just doing what they were doing and not expanding the pool of infrastructure. So at the very least, if you're going to lead with a corporate strategy, you have to ensure these are new projects, not things that were already on the books.
You buy it? You're not?
I do. And actually taxes is going to be hard, easier than infrastructure. The secondary piece to infrastructure is, it is this tax credit policy, but there's this big talk, we'll partner with private industry, private investment. The problem with private investment is you can understand how a private investment firm would say, do a deal for, say, toll roads or something else where there is revenue.
Where they can collect the tolls.
Eventually get some sort of revenue. But if you want to fix the little bridge that connects 5 houses to, the store where milk is, no private investment firm is ever going to invest in
Or
that.
the water system in Flint, Michigan,
or the water
for
system.
example.
And the secondary piece of that is the tax credits is a lot of the investors in these are nonprofits anyway, pension funds. They don't need a tax break. It matters nothing to them.
I don't even understand how anything gets done. All these people hate each other. I know that's maybe a little bit of a grand thing.
No, that's about
the
right.
Republicans hate the Republicans, even though Chuck Schumer's saying, we'll work with the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, we'll work with the Republicans under appropriate circumstances. There's no evidence anybody really wants to work with anybody on anything, despite the highfalutin rhetoric. Is there or is there?
Well, the Democrats don't want to work with the Republicans, but that should not be a surprise, and it is definitely a tit for tat for the past, 8 years of GOP obstructionism. I think that we just have to keep our eyes on the ball of what's happening within the Republican Party, because I look at global political parties and most parties around the world. There's multi-party democracies. Here, you basically have people who hate each other crammed into one party. So you have the Clinton and Sanders wing in one party, and you have the Freedom Caucus and the Tuesday folks in another
Those are the
party.
moderate Republicans.
Yeah, I mean, it's just. Let's face it, the internal dynamics of political parties. That's why LBJ was an amazing president in many ways, because he was a butt kicker. He just got in there and he said, I know you guys don't like me and I know you guys don't like each other, but we're just gonna pull up on this, and there is no person, the current occupant of the White House cannot muster that kind of moxie, and I'm not saying
Barack Obama, I should say, was no expert.
No,
at
he
that
wasn't either.
He was
No, but I'm
saying,
saying, but in some ways, LBJ, who was a flawed president for sure, but he is in some ways a model of someone who could wrangle this kind of environment, and I don't see anything like that happening.
From the outside, it's not just the infight. I rarely quote Newt Gingrich, but let me do it anyway. The former speaker is a big-time Donald Trump supporter. He says over the weekend, why would you schedule a vote on a bill that is at 17% approval? Have we forgotten everything Reagan taught us? And you say to yourself, I mean, it's so obvious, it's pathetic, but then you say to yourself, what are they thinking?
Well,
he
didn't try to sell it, yeah.
If they had the votes Friday afternoon, there would have been a vote. And they probably only lost by 20, whatever it was. They would have been willing to pass a bill that fewer than 1 in 5 Americans actually supported.
Well, look, all the reporting on this has been that Trump didn't get into the weeds on this details-wise. And for all of Obama's problems not getting Republicans on board with the health care plan, he is somebody who's kind of policy-oriented. And because it took over a year, he was constantly going over the details because it took over a year to get done. Trump, by all the reporting, wanted a win. Didn't care what the win was, didn't care what the specifics in the bill were so long as it got passed. And he got tied to fixing health care or to getting rid of Obamacare.
I'm not laughing at you. For some reason, I just started thinking about this Pirro thing, which is my favorite story of the last 3 days. Again, he tweets, watch the television show. The television show begins, I think it was a 6-minute monologue, trashing Paul Ryan by Judge Pirro, saying he should resign. After which, Reince Priebus, his chief of staff, said, oh, no, he had no idea it was on the television
But he might have known Fox and Friends that very morning, which he does watch, had a teaser at the bottom of Chiron, which said there was going to be new details about the Russia investigation. In other words, suggesting that she was going to have some details that were going to be good for him. It's entirely possible he based his tweet on.
That he didn't know that Ryan was about to be trashed.
I think it's entirely possible.
But
Really?
Yeah, well, obviously you don't. I'm with you.
Yeah, I don't.
He's trying. I mean, he talks to Ryan on the phone on Saturday for an hour. Allegedly, they're getting along great. And then he says, go watch his television show. Isn't that the way he operates? To basically, I love you, I hate you, I love you. I mean, isn't that
Well, he's blamed several different entities and groups. So he's blamed the Freedom Caucus, he being President Trump. He's blamed the Freedom Caucus in a tweet. He's blamed the Democrats. And I do think that he's back-channel blaming Paul Ryan.
And he's supposedly really angry at Reince Priebus, too, so he's pretty much covered everybody. Let's talk about
Except Steve Bannon, by the way, who's, I guess, owns the cutlery drawer, because the knives are never out for Steve Bannon. They're always out for somebody else.
I want to talk about the Democrats for a minute. When Chuck Schumer says things like under the appropriate circumstances, and Nancy Pelosi, too, says, I want to work with these people, let's stay with the Senate for a minute. I want to work with Donald Trump on appropriate things at the same time that we are working like crazy to ensure that he can't get his Supreme Court nominee, who even critics say is probably the best that they're going to get. I mean, it may be, again, getting back, I quote him almost every night, elections have consequences, Barack Obama. It's not getting any better than Gorsuch unless Donald Trump decides to, out of an act of conscience, pick Merrick Garland. It's not happening. So isn't Schumer and the Democrats, aren't they sending as many mixed messages as Donald Trump himself is?
They are, but of course Schumer and the Democrats don't matter. Donald Trump is president. Schumer them are the Democrats. If Trump deigns to let them into a process, they get to play. Otherwise, they just sit on the
Wait, they
sideline.
might matter. Are there 52 Republicans unless they use the infamous nuclear option?
Which they've said they're going to use.
The Republicans,
Yes.
which drops the threshold down to
51.
50. You know, we
50.
all talk about this like it'd be an unmitigated disaster if they dropped it to 50. But the Democrats themselves, when they were in charge, dropped the threshold for cabinet secretaries and judges other than Supreme Court justices to 50. So are we hyperventilating over something not that big a deal? A majority is a majority. It's not a supermajority. Would it be the end of the world if the Republicans made that move on Gorsuch?
You know, I have a couple different thoughts about this, but the first one is that most people never get close enough to government to understand what we're even talking about. And I think it's important, you know, like, I actually think a supermajority is a good idea in many instances, but what I'm also interested in is when are Congress people and senators accountable to their constituents who, you know, do you understand?
The day the gerrymandering disappears is the day they'll be responsible to constituents.
You know, because
right?
I actually agree with you very much on Gorsuch. I don't think it makes sense for the Democrats to try to, you know, squash.
Well, not only because it's a losing battle, but if you want to convince the American people,
Right.
we're willing to work with this president, even though we can't stand him,
Right.
say the Democrats, on appropriate things. For the most part, he's like...
But see, I don't think that the Democrats have any particular incentive to cooperate with President Trump. I really don't. I mean, they may say things that are just part of what you say when you're in politics, but they have no incentive. I mean, he's provided no incentive.
On that upbeat note, we got to go, Fry.
Thank you so much.
Dan, it's great to see you too. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.